Now, many reports stated that Reagan's attention drifted. He fell asleep during meetings and appeared disinterested in the government. He was often uninformed at press conferences. He delegated a great deal of authority and was clearly not in charge. Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, stated that Reagan spent his time napping and eating jelly beans. Who was running the U.S. government? Okay. Now, England's Prince Charles, heir to the British throne, married Lady Diana Spencer on July 29, 1981. The marriage was broadcast on international TV because it was an alliance of English conservatives, represented by Prince Charles, with the Southern Baptist fundamentalists and General Electric, represented by Lady Diana. Both Prince Charles and Lady Di were descendants of Stuart kings who granted charters for the founding and colonization of Virginia, the Carolinas, and Georgia. The marriage was a concentration of Stuart heritage or spirits. It was this alliance that generated the rise of Margaret Thatcher and the Conservative Party, and the rise of Ronald Reagan, General Electric, and Southern Baptist fundamentalists. Princess Di gave birth to Prince William, second in line to the British throne, and Prince Harry, third in line. Now, porphyria and hemophilia are genetic disorders that appear when concentrated Stuart heritage or concentrated Stuart spirits reincarnate. Porphyria, directly or indirectly, caused 3 major national disasters for Great Britain and the destruction of much of 18th century Europe. Now, Prince Harry shows signs of porphyria. Internet scenes show the 28-year-old prince naked in a Vegas hotel room. For punishment, he was sentenced to 4 months of flying Apache attack helicopters in Afghanistan. Now, this chart shows the occurrence of porphyria in British royalty. And over here, this was King George III. They called him Mad King George because he suffered from porphyria. At times, he had to be restrained in a straitjacket. But when he came to himself, he was still King of England. I mean, nothing like having a mad king, you know? So, meanwhile, unemployment continued to rise. 548 U.S. businesses failed in 1 week of June 1982. Nationwide unemployment reached 10.8% in 1982, and 12 million people were out of work. U.S. productivity was low. Foreign competition was increasing. Economic growth virtually ceased and oil prices rose, but revolts were few and scattered. Blacks were no longer united in 1982. The wealthy, college-educated, church-going blacks formed an upper class and discriminated against the 34% of blacks who yet lived in poverty. In 1982, Israelis invaded Lebanon in an attempt to destroy the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO. The Lebanese government asked Syria's help. Now, military forces from France, Italy, and the U.S. formed a peacekeeping force, but the U.S. Marines allied with another Lebanese faction and tried to overthrow the Syrian government. A year later, terrorist bombs in the American barracks killed 240 U.S. servicemen. The Reagan administration pulled U.S. forces from Lebanon and stationed them in the Persian Gulf, where Iran and Iraq were at war in a border dispute over a rich oil-producing region. The war reached a stalemate and then a ceasefire before the U.S. forces could interfere. I hear you. Grenada is an island in the West Indies. The population consists of blacks, mulattoes, and a few thousand East Indian people, and a white immigrant minority and their descendants. Historians state, only on the tiny Caribbean island of Grenada did Reagan win a modest victory. The president ordered Marines there in October 1983. After a military coup installed a government sympathetic to Fidel Castro's Cuba. 2,000 Marines invaded the island and claimed triumph. President Reagan and the U.S. received worldwide criticism for the invasion of Grenada. Here's this great big country invading this little tiny country. Okay, now Reagan also openly opposed native rebels of El Salvador who fought against a pro-U.S. regimented militant dictatorial government. Now Reagan increased U.S. aid to the pro-U.S. government, not acknowledging that the same thing happened in Vietnam. Now this little picture down here is a monument to people who were massacred, and a UN Commission report issued in 1993 concluded that a group trained in the U.S. had been responsible for the massacre. And notice that the U.S. has been attacking these little black countries, poor countries. And here's a country with these strategic weapons, Star Wars, and they're going attacking these poor little people. Okay, Nicaragua is the largest country in Central America. Now, Christopher Columbus landed in Nicaragua in 1502, and Spain enslaved the native population. Spanish rule ended, and Britain and the U.S. seized power in 1856 after ship owner Cornelius Vanderbilt suppressed a repressive militant government. In 1927, the U.S. sent Marines to Nicaragua to repress a liberal faction. The U.S. supervised elections in 1928 and 1932, and liberal presidents won overwhelming victories. Historians state that U.S. Marines withdrew from Nicaragua in 1933 after carefully training a Nicaraguan National Guard led by Anastasio Somoza. Now, the election showed that they wanted their own government, a liberal faction. So the U.S. in 1933, they withdrew after they had trained this man, Somoza. And in 1934, Somoza instigated the assassination of Cesar Sandino, the foremost liberal leader. In 1936, Somoza ran for president without opposition. He had nobody else was running. And he established a pro-U.S. dictatorship and ruled with an iron hand for 20 years. During that time, the country was prosperous, but profits went to the Somoza family, their supporters and staff. Now, Anastasio Somoza was assassinated in 1954. His eldest son succeeded him and ruled until his death in 1964. No, he was assassinated in 54 and his son succeeded him and ruled to 64. Then the second son, Anastasio Somoza, ruled. Meanwhile, rebels who called themselves Sandinistas after Cesar Sandino organized in 1962. Now, in 1972, an earthquake devastated Managua, the capital of Nicaragua, killing some 6,000 people and leaving 300,000 homeless. Now, international aid flowed into Nicaragua. Everybody wanted to help. And the Somoza government used the money to enrich their family as opposed to aiding the earthquake victims. President Carter initially sent aid to the new Sandinista government, but cut off support to show disapproval of curbs on civil liberties and alleged efforts to help rebelling natives of El Salvador. The new Sandinista government then cultivated ties with Communist Cuba and the Soviet Union. Now, the Reagan administration planned to topple the Sandinista government. And the CIA armed and trained 10,000 counter-revolutionaries who were known as Contras. The Contras started a bitter civil war in Nicaragua, Early in 1984, the world learned that U.S. forces mined Nicaraguan harbors. Congress then voted to cut U.S. aid to the countries. Okay, now American industry was less productive in the mid-1980s because the nation's resources were used to create weapons of destruction. More and more labels said made in Japan, or made in Thailand, or made in Canada, etc. Over 75% of Americans worked in service industries as computer operators, clerks, fast food workers, doctors, lawyers, bankers, etc. Now, like the collapse in British and the ancient Roman empires, the U.S. manufactured nothing and had fewer and fewer products to trade. Japanese cars had taken over 25% of the American auto market. Automakers were shutting down with massive layoffs. Shutdowns and layoffs spread to workers in glass, rubber, and steel. Burglaries were up 56%, robberies up 42%, murder up 31%, assaults up 79%, and rape up 99%. Poverty rose, and by 1986, over 42% of blacks lived in poverty, a rise of 8% in 5 years of government by the Baptist fundamentalist Reagan administration. Planet Earth, the home of all nations and all plants, animals, and mankind, was not being tended and governed by scientific laws of nature to ensure the continued growth of godlike creation. President Reagan and Jerry Falwell simply shut their eyes tightly and said, "Let us pray." In 1985, the Reagan administration's National Security Council illegally sold U.S. military secrets to Iran in exchange for the release of American citizens held hostage in Lebanon by Iran-allied Shiite Muslims. In 1986, the National Security Council illegally shipped anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles to Iran in exchange for $48 million, which the U.S. used to aid Nicaraguan Contras against Sandinistas. A textbook passage states, commissions and congressional hearings demonstrated the chaos in the administration and cast doubt on the president's ability to govern. Oliver was convicted but served no time in prison. Now these are the government officials, the highest government officials committing all these crimes, and they don't serve any time in prison. In the short run, Reagan's economic policies succeeded, but spending for national upkeep and maintenance fell far short of what was needed. And in 1987, the U.S. became the world's largest debtor nation, owing some $500 billion to foreign nations. The stock market crashed in 1987, just before Reagan left office. Now, George H.W. Bush was the son of an investment banker. Bush was a torpedo bomber in World War II. In 1953, he co-founded a Texas oil corporation. Bush was part of the 1971 Nixon administration and headed the CIA in 1976 and 1977 during Ford's administration. In 1980, Bush became Reagan's running mate and was vice president for the next 8 years. President Bush followed Baptist fundamentalist conservative policies and attempted to start a counter-revolution in Haiti. Once again, they're picking on a black nation, a small one.